Rowan Pike, we need to talk. The carriage wheels had barely stopped when the woman stepped down, silk skirts brushing the dust in front of Red Willow. Her face was sharp, composed, and far too confident for a person who had been gone for years. Rosie stood near the porch steps, a basket in her hands, unsure if she should move or stay. The woman's eyes slid over her with open disdain. "I said I need a word alone," she repeated. "Tell her to step aside." Rowan walked forward from the barn, wiping dust from his hands. His voice was steady. "Rosie is my wife. She stays." The woman laughed, not loudly but with a cold edge that cut through the yard. "Your wife? I never signed any divorce papers. And on the church ledger, I am still your lawful wife. Not her." Rosie froze. The basket slipped from her hand, apples rolling across the dirt. Heat climbed up her neck, and she stepped back, unable to look at either of them. The woman's gaze followed her retreat with satisfaction. "Don't think you can replace me so easily," she said, her eyes narrowing at Rosie as she turned toward the house. Rosie hurried inside, breath shaking. Behind her, the woman folded her arms and faced Rowan directly, confidence rising like she had already won. The ranch hands nearby slowed their work, unsure whether to move closer or pretend they had heard nothing. Dust hung in the air, thick and uncomfortable, as if the land itself sensed trouble. The woman stepped closer to Rowan. "You knew I'd come back one day. You should have known nothing ends until I say it ends." Rowan didn't answer. His jaw tightened, and for the first time in years, Red Willow felt smaller, tighter, and no longer safe. "We take half his ranch, then we disappear," the man whispered behind the inn, keeping his hat low. The woman glanced around before answering. "Once I have the land, you'll get your share. Rowan still owes me more than he knows." The man leaned closer. "And after that? When you're done squeezing him?" She looked away, her voice calm. "After that, I won't need Rowan at all." The man smirked. "Then hurry. The sooner he signs, the sooner we're gone." Rowan faced her in the yard, hands firm at his sides. The woman's smile sharpened as she watched Rosie disappear into the house. "I'll make this simple," she said. "If you want that girl to be your lawful wife, you'll have to divorce me first. And divorce means dividing everything we built while we were married." "I want half." Rowan's voice stayed calm. "You left 5 years ago." "And the law doesn't care," she snapped. "The ledger says I'm still your wife. You want to fix that? Then give me what I'm owed." She looked around the ranch as if measuring each fence post. "You want her," she jerked her chin toward the house, "to stand beside you legally? Then cut the land. Cut the livestock. Cut the money." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You want that fat girl recognized as your wife? Then pay the price." Rowan's jaw tightened. For the first time, he understood she had not returned for closure. She had returned for the ranch. "I just need a minute," Rosie whispered as she closed the door behind her. The house felt smaller than it ever had. She pressed her back against the wall, her breath uneven. The words outside still echoed in her chest, each one heavier than the last. She had thought she finally found a place where she belonged, but the woman's claim cut through her like an old wound reopening. Rosie looked at her hands. They shook the same way they used to when her stepmother told her she was nothing more than a burden. The same way they shook when her father died, and no one cared where she slept or what she ate. Now the same fear returned. Maybe I am temporary. Maybe I'm only filling a space someone else left behind. Outside, Rowan stood in the yard, staring at the dust rising from the carriage wheels as it rolled away. His jaw tightened. For 15 years, this ranch had been his whole life. Every fence post, every calf, every acre, built with his hands. And now, half of it could be taken because of a marriage that died long before he was ready to admit it. He feared losing land, but losing Rosie frightened him more. She was the first person in years who chose him without asking for anything back. And now the past he tried to bury had come home and threatened the only good thing he had left. Two people stood in two different rooms, but the same weight pressed on both of them, the fear of losing each other before they even had the chance to begin. "Rosie, please sit with me." Rowan's voice was quiet, not weak, but careful. She hesitated before lowering herself onto the edge of the chair. Her hands were locked together in her lap. She kept her eyes down. Rowan leaned forward slightly. "I want you to know exactly what happened 5 years ago." She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. That was enough for him to continue. "My wife left," he said. "There was no letter. No word. Nothing. I looked for her for 3 months. I rode to every town she might have passed. Nobody had seen her. Nobody knew anything." He shook his head once. "Then the pastor told me something I held on to for far too long. He said, if someone leaves home for 5 winters and never sends word, the marriage is already dead." And I believed him. Rosie finally lifted her eyes. 5 years? And you never filed for divorce?" Rowan exhaled slowly. "I didn't understand the law. I thought when she went off with another man, the marriage ended by itself. I thought it meant I was free. I didn't know there were papers, hearings, signatures. I thought the church's word was enough." She swallowed. "And the ranch?" He nodded toward the window. "To file anything, I would have had to ride 40 miles to the county courthouse. It takes days, sometimes weeks, and the ranch needed me every hour back then. Calves were dying. Fences were falling. I had no one to leave it to. I couldn't walk away long enough to do it. Not without losing everything." Rosie's fingers loosened slightly. "So you stayed." "I stayed," he said, "and I worked. And I tried to forget." He paused. "Until you came." Rosie looked down again, afraid of the answer but needing it anyway. "Why did you choose me, Rowan?" "Truly." Rowan sat back, remembering. "I saw you leave a small pie on Mrs. Crane's step. Nobody saw you. Nobody thanked you. You just did it." He let out a soft breath. "My mother was like that. She did good quietly. She helped people because it was right, not because anyone was watching. When I saw you do the same, it felt familiar. It felt safe. It felt honest." Her eyes tightened. "You didn't choose me because you pitied me." "No," he said firmly. "Not pity. I chose you because you reminded me of the best person I ever knew." Her lips trembled. For a moment, she seemed younger, like the girl who spent her life being called unwanted. She whispered, "I wasn't wanted in my own home. My mother died the day I was born. My father remarried, and before he passed, he signed papers making my stepmother my legal guardian. She hated me for it. She said I was a burden. She made me sign debts I didn't understand when I was 13. I was never treated like someone who mattered." Rowan moved to the chair beside her. "Look at me." She slowly turned her head. "You matter here," he said. "And when the time comes, your name will stand next to mine. Even if I lose everything else." For the first time since the woman arrived, Rosie breathed without pain. "We need to think clearly," Rosie said as they sat at the kitchen table. Her voice was steady now, steadier than Rowan expected. She pushed a pencil toward him and spread an empty ledger page between them. "If she wants half, then we decide which half she gets," Rosie continued. "Not everything has the same value." Rowan folded his arms. "The ranch is a single piece of work. Cutting it apart will hurt no matter what." Rosie nodded. "Yes, but some parts bleed faster than others." She pointed to the list she had written. "We protect the parts that keep the ranch alive." She spoke plainly, one item at a time. "First, we keep the breeding cattle. They're your future seasons. Losing them means losing years. Second, we keep the land close to the water. That's the only reliable pasture left. Third, we keep the tools and equipment that still work. And fourth, you need at least 6 months of operating money. Without that, Even good land won't save you. Rowan listened carefully, surprised at how precise she sounded. Then what do we give? He asked. Rosie pointed to the other column. The far fields. They cost more to maintain than they earn. She can have those. She can have the stored grain, the old tools, and a portion of your savings. She hesitated but did not waver. It hurts, but it keeps the ranch alive. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. You're not just my wife, Rosie, he said. You're my partner. A quiet pride settled in her chest, small, but strong enough to hold her up. The kitchen table was covered with papers Rowan had spread out the night before. Numbers filled every margin. Feed costs, tool repairs, wages. The ranch had already shrunk, and the loss of cash tightened every corner of the ledger. Rowan stood with his hands on the table, staring at the totals he wished were different. He called the men together near the barn. Dust swirled around their boots as they waited. Rowan cleared his throat. We may need to let a few of you go, he said. The words were heavy. Every man there had helped him build Red Willow from almost nothing. Before he said more, Rosie stepped forward. Rowan, may I speak? He gave a slow nod. She faced the men. There is a way we can get through this without sending anyone home, she said. But it will take all of us choosing to stay. The men exchanged glances, unsure. Rosie continued, her voice steady. First, wages may need to be lowered for a while. Second, Rowan can offer a small share of future profits or a percentage of the ranch once it grows again. Third, if any man cannot stay because his family needs him, he should be free to decide without shame. Silence held for a moment. One of the older hands, Mark, stepped forward. Miss Rosie, we've been here since the boss had 2 cows and half a fence. We're not walking away now. Several others nodded. Jacob, the foreman, added, if the ranch struggles, we struggle with it. If it rises, we rise too. Rowan looked at Rosie, unable to hide the surprise in his eyes. He had spent years believing he had to carry everything alone. Now she had done in minutes what he had not found the words to do. As the men returned to their tasks, Rowan stood beside her. He didn't speak, but the thought came without effort. She is strong in ways I will never be. Rosie offered him a small, tired smile. We'll get through it, she said. And for the first time that day, he believed it. The meeting took place inside the small church office, where the pastor and the town's senior councilman acted as witnesses. No judge, no courtroom, no travel, only a quiet room, a wooden desk, and documents that would close a long-dead chapter. The agreement was read aloud. The woman listened with folded arms, pleased with every line that favored her. She would receive the far acreage, the stored grain, and a sizable amount of cash. Rowan would keep the breeding cattle, the water-fed pasture, and the tools needed to survive the next season. Rowan signed first. His hand did not shake, but the line he drew felt heavier than ink. Rosie stood behind him, steady and calm. Then the woman signed, her smile sharp as she folded the papers. She lifted her chin. I hope she was worth it. Rowan did not answer. When she left, the room felt lighter, though the cost had been steep. Outside the church, Rowan took Rosie's hand. If Red Willow falls, he said quietly, you and I will build it again. Rosie tightened her fingers around his. It was not victory, but it was freedom. The days after the agreement were long and demanding. The ranch felt smaller, and the weight of what had been lost pressed on everyone. Still, work did not wait. Red Willow needed hands, sweat, and hours. Rowan rose before sunrise each day. He checked fences, guided the men through the grazing rotation, and walked the fields to judge what could still be planted. The cattle were fewer now, but each one mattered. He treated them as the foundation of the ranch's future. Rosie kept the house running, but her work reached far beyond the kitchen. She tracked every expense in the ledger. She calculated feed needs down to the last sack. She coordinated tasks with Jacob so the men never lacked direction. Midday meals were simple but warm, and the table became a place where everyone drew strength before returning to their labor. The men stayed late most evenings. They repaired what could be saved and set aside plans for future expansions. There were no grand speeches, but the quiet determination spoke clearly. Red Willow would stand. Sometimes, when Rowan passed the open window of the kitchen, he saw Rosie bent over the ledger, her brow slightly furrowed as she worked. He paused each time, reminded again that he wasn't rebuilding alone. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Rosie stepped outside with 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one and looked over the fields with him. The land was bruised but still alive. The ranch was wounded but still theirs. "We'll make it," she said softly. Rowan nodded. "We already are." Side by side, they watched the last light fall across Red Willow, knowing the hardest part wasn't behind them, but they were no longer facing it alone. Early autumn brought cooler air, and with it a gap in the ranch's income. The herd was smaller now, and the land had not fully recovered. Rowan stood near the fence one morning, studying the fields with cautious hope. Rosie joined him, wiping flour from her hands after the morning meal. She pointed toward a patch of soil that stayed warm even as other areas cooled. "This ground drains well," she said. "If we plant pinto beans here, we can harvest before the first freeze. It won't make us rich, but it will keep the ranch steady." Rowan considered the idea carefully. He had been planting and harvesting all his life, yet Rosie saw things he overlooked. "Beans would bring steady money," he said, "and they grow even when the land's tired." He gave a small nod. "Let's try it." While Rowan and the men prepared the fields, Rosie worked on something else. She noticed how the ranch hands finished meals quickly and how neighboring farms often passed by at midday. Food was a need that never stopped. She cleared the old storage room, swept it clean, and set up a small counter. Jacob wandered in as she arranged jars. "What's this?" "A place to sell bread, pies, and whatever we have available," Rosie said. "Folks on the road can buy a meal instead of riding into town." Jacob grinned. "People will line up for your biscuits, Miss Rosie." When Rowan saw the makeshift stall later that day, he paused in the doorway. "You did all this after cooking breakfast for 20 people?" Rosie shrugged. "We need more income. This is something I can do." Rowan stepped closer. "Then I'll help with whatever you need." By the end of the week, the bean field was planted, and the stall had its first customers, travelers, ranch hands, and a few neighbors curious about the Red Willow bread. Rowan noticed the smiles after each bite, and Rosie noticed how Rowan's shoulders loosened each time a coin dropped into the box. The ranch still struggled, but now 2 new streams of income flowed, and both came from ideas born not out of desperation, but partnership. A month later, a wagon arrived at the far end of the property, on the land that once belonged to Rowan but now legally belonged to someone else. A young couple stepped down, their little boy trailing behind them, clutching a wooden horse. They walked over to introduce themselves. The husband spoke first. "We're the Millers. We bought this parcel last month." Rowan shook his hand. "Welcome to Red Willow Valley." One of the ranch hands, Tom, muttered under his breath. "Bought land that shouldn't have been for sale?" Rosie caught it immediately. She touched Tom's arm. "They didn't take anything from us. They simply bought land that was offered. Treat them kindly." Tom flushed and nodded. The Millers settled quickly, and soon there were shared tools, shared recipes, and shared hands when storms rolled across the valley. Rosie often sent over a basket of bread. The Miller wife sent back jars of preserved peaches. Their little boy followed Rowan around sometimes, asking endless questions about cattle. One evening, the Millers invited Rowan and Rosie for supper. The table was warm, filled with stew and fresh cornbread. Midway through the meal, the husband looked at Rowan. "I heard this land used to be yours." Rowan nodded once. "I'm sorry for what happened," the man said gently. "Truly. But you should know, your former wife, she lost everything. The sheriff came by last week for statements. That fellow she traveled with took all her money and disappeared. The room fell quiet. The Miller wife sighed. One lost everything. The other may soon be hunted. It's sad how people can destroy their own lives. Rosie looked at Rowan with steady eyes. We gained more than we lost, she said softly. Look around. And Rowan did. After supper, the two couples stepped outside to breathe the cool evening air. The valley was quiet except for a few cattle lowing in the distance. The stars were beginning to appear. Rosie folded her hands. It hurt when everything fell apart, she said. But maybe it fell apart the way it needed to. The Miller wife touched her arm gently. You're strong. Anyone can see it. The Miller husband nodded. Losing half a ranch would break most men. But you two, you rebuilt. And now look at this place. It's alive again. Rosie smiled faintly. We were lucky. We kept the cattle, kept the pasture, and we still have the men who stood with Rowan since the first days. And now we have good neighbors too. She looked at the Millers with sincere warmth. Rowan watched her speak, pride touching every line of his face. Rosie turned to him, lifting her chin just slightly. If you think about it, we came out ahead, didn't we? Rowan's answer came without hesitation. Yes, we did. The Millers walked them back toward the fence line, trading promises of help with the next harvest. The lantern light glowed softly behind them as they said goodnight. Rowan and Rosie crossed the pasture slowly. She leaned into him just a little, and he steadied her with a quiet arm. The ranch was still scarred, still healing, but it was theirs, rebuilt by their hands and their choices. When they reached the porch, Rosie looked back at the valley. It's strange, she said, losing so much, yet feeling richer. Rowan touched her hand. Because what we kept, he said, was worth more than anything we lost. The door closed behind them, and Red Willow stood calm in the dark, proof that even broken things can rise again when two people refuse to let go. And just like that, Rosie and Rowan's journey comes to an end. To be honest with you, I originally planned to tell their entire story in one single video. But I soon realized it was impossible to capture everything, their struggles, their healing, and that beautiful ending, without giving them a little more space to breathe. That's why their journey grew into this final chapter. If you've been listening to my stories for a while, you might notice something. My videos these days feel a little different from the early ones. I've been slowly learning, improving, and trying new ways to bring these Western tales to life. And if you're still here, listening to this moment, thank you. Truly. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me how this story made you feel, and what you'd love to see next. Your feedback helps me grow, and it means more than you know. Thank you all so much, and I wish you a warm, peaceful evening with your loved ones.